Anyway, okay, well, it's a general mentoring thing, so it's open to any basic questions and things people want to talk about. Throw it open.
Since I got you, I'm going to ask, how did you begin to see, meet the men in white linen, go into the spirit? What was there? How did that progress for you?
I think my first encounter with someone, having started to engage in the heavenly realms involuntarily when Jesus took me there, I met Jacob. Was the first one of the men in white linen I met. Some of these things are become quite symbolic of things. So I was there, and he was digging a hole. So he had a spade and he was digging a hole. So I said, well, I didn't know he was. I just said, well, what are you doing? He said, I'm digging a well. So I said, who are you? He said, Jacob. So it came, immediately in my mind was, I didn't think you dug any wells. I know Abraham did. I know Isaac did. I'm not sure you did, but anyway, okay, you're digging a well. So I talked to him, and he basically told me to read about his life and look at particularly Genesis 28 in terms of the account of Bethel and the open heaven and ladder and all that stuff. And so I spent some time meditating in that and looking at it, and I had a lot of revelation that came in terms of how we're the house of God and the gateway of heaven, and how that applies to us now, which is sort of foundational to a lot of things I do. But initially it was very much, it just happened, and I remember going back to him, and then I discovered when I was looking about his life, of course, in the New Testament, we have Jesus with the woman of Samaria, which was at Jacob's well at Sychar. So he did dig a well, and it was to do with salvation, in the connection. So things like that. I've had lots of interaction with like Enoch and others. Now, some of it was just, I came across them, or something happened where I engaged in something and then interacted. I didn't know anything about the court of the upright or going there for a while, until I was shown it. Where else did I engage? I mean, there were some things I wanted to know, so I sought them out. I sought Adam out because I wanted to know what went on before the fall, and I wanted to talk to him, so I did find him and talk to him. Now, some of it comes out of desire, and I can't tell you how I found him. I can remember just desiring to talk to him, and found myself standing next to him, talking to him and asking him things, and which was quite eye-opening, because he told me things that I didn't know, which was like, oh, okay, I didn't realize that, and didn't realize that, and I sort of going in to find out, oh, right, okay, I can see where that, now I can understand what you're talking about. But so they've been quite interesting. It's not something that I particularly seek out in general, but sometimes I come across people. We definitely have engaged them as a church for the perspective of, a group of them were assigned to us as like a council of 12. And then as all our mountains have started to get upright, I've encouraged them to engage in the court of upright and find out if there are any assigned to each mountain, if there's any particular reason that they would have been assigned for something, and some very clearly were. So that's been my personal experience of it. I do, I had the encounter where, I was in a time of worship in a conference, and 4 of them came and stood next to me, that I was very, very aware of, and that was Joshua and Joseph and Daniel and Enoch. They just came and stood next to me and unveiled some things to understand, why they came and what they were doing in strengthening me. They lifted up my arms and strengthened me in terms of engagement with things. So yeah, I think it's one of those things. Obviously it creates a lot of controversy in areas where people say, well, you're talking to the dead and all that sort of stuff, but obviously Jesus did, so that's okay. Jesus talked to Moses and Elijah, so why shouldn't we? So yeah, that was some of my experiences. It's not really that I go and seek them out. They often seem to find me.
Okay.
But I know where to go if I need to engage them, because I just go to the court of the upright and engage them.
Okay.
Yeah.
A friend of mine, the Lord told her, quit talking to yourself. You're talking to the dead. Said, okay.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Mike. That helps me. Yeah, it helps me go to the court of the upright. If I realize it's, I don't need to be talking to them. Just the Lord leads that way. That's more of what it is.
Yeah, that's how it works for me. I mean, I only do really what I feel my spirit leading me to do or mandated to do. What I've noticed is they do turn up a lot in the Chancellor's Court, and they come and stand next to people in support when they're bringing mandates or blueprints to the Chancellor's Court. I've found, that they are quite active in looking. I mean, I've seen them engage with our meetings and looking in and looking to what we're doing. And that's certainly increasing, I think, as they realize that we're actually starting to do something that matters rather than mess around all the time, selfishly looking to enjoy our times of worship for our benefit rather than seeking to engage the presence of God for what he wants us to do. And I think worship will change dramatically once people realize that it should be done in heaven and not just things that we're come here all the time. When God's actually saying exactly the same thing to us, well, come here. So I think it will change quite a lot once we understand that we're not having to sing to him to get him to show up. He's already shows up where we're gathered. It's not to do with our singing. It does talk about inhabiting our praise, but praise isn't singing either. Praise is praise. That's what it is, and that's a lifestyle in a sense of honoring and giving thanks and praising God for who he is and what he does, and that will attract his presence. We tend to interpret things like that in light of our experiences. So you'll have worship leaders inviting him to come and inhabit our praises, as if by singing to him is really going to make a difference. Because we can sing to him and have no praise whatsoever. It can just be songs that everyone's singing by rote and not really meaning it from their heart. So it really isn't to do with structures in that way. It actually, on the other side of it, you could say we enter his courts with praise and in thanksgiving. So that's access the other way. So yeah, I personally feel that the more we are in tune, with the Spirit, have mandates for what we're doing, then we do that. If God wants them to look me up for some reason, then God will have a reason for doing that, and then I will certainly respond. Because I've engaged Enoch a number of times, not by my willingness, just because he showed up some places where I engaged, and I avoided him if I could, because he kept giving me things to do. It's like, oh no, another quest to do something. Yeah. So it was like, oh, I'm not sure about that guy. He keeps giving me things that I need to be active about. So, but I guess if God assigns them, or they have a mandate themselves to engage in particular things, because I do think they connect and associate with things that they have invested into or things that they have connection to. So most of the ones that engage with us in our Council of 12 were very administrative in their function. You know, something about their lives was administrative. So one of them was A.A. Allen. Now, most people associate A.A. Allen with miracles and signs and wonders, but the guy set up Miracle Valley Printing Press. And he was one of the first people to make sure that information got out. He sent out newsletters. He sent out other things to make sure people were aware and connected. And that was, in a sense, a number of them were like that. They had a sort of a kingdom administrative function that, you know, we connected to. Another one that we connected was Gordon Lindsay, who was, I think, the voice of healing. And he produced, when all the healing revival stuff was going on in the 40s and 50s particularly, he coordinated it all with a Voice of Healing magazine and a huge subscription to, again, coordinate some of the things that were going on. So he was one of the ones that was assigned to us. So they all seem to have, you know, as part of what they did in their lives, something which was associated with, you know, administrating the kingdom, not just doing miracles and other things. You know, and another one that we had was Frances Hunter, who's Joan Hunter's mother. And she and her husband basically were involved in, when they went to do healing things, they were the first people who started to equip people how to do it, and didn't do it as, well, we're the healers and everyone's going to come and we're going to lay hands on people. They would go to places and they would equip the ministry teams of those places to do the ministry, which I think was way ahead of its time, because a lot of those healing evangelists, it was all about them. You know, they were the main man and everything was focused on them. And I think Joan Hunter was, or Frances Hunter was one of the ones that very clearly caught hold of the fact that they need to equip the body to do this. You know, so yeah, those were some of the ones that were connected to us, but there was obviously a reason that God had assigned. You know, so I was, okay, I wanted to know why. You know, what about those people were significant? And as I began to engage them and meditate around it, it was obviously apparent that there were certain things, like William Booth was another one. Well, William Booth set up, obviously, the Salvation Army, but from a whole way of coordinating things to be done effectively and with authority and whatever else, you know. So there was things that were very sort of administrative in a way, but kingdom orientated. So that was fun, you know. And you know, one of the last guys we connected, when we were connecting as mountains to that, one of our mountains, which is our Enterprise mountain, connected with Andrew Carnegie. And, you know, he was a huge sort of philanthropic guy who gave away as much money as he possibly could in his life, and still ended up with masses of it that he didn't manage to give away. You know, but he you know, obviously did a lot of issues, you know, Carnegie Hall and all the things that, you know, people recognized for him. But he had a very strong philosophy of enterprise and creative entrepreneurial spirit, which was very insightful for some of the guys on our Enterprise mountain. So, you know, none of them had ever even heard of him when he showed up, and they were like, well, who are you? so and even when he said, they didn't really know what he actually did. So when they looked it up, it was like, whoa, he did all sorts of educational things, and very much sort of philanthropic from a kingdom perspective. So that was quite interesting. So, yeah. Okay. Any other questions that people want to talk about things today?
Mike?
Yeah.
Who, from your experience, is Metatron? I mean, what class? I mean, he doesn't seem of the regular angelic class. And I haven't got an answer, but I'm trying to understand who he is.
Well, he's obviously a created being. He is the chief of the Order of the Chaos, which are the living creatures. So he administrates the living creatures, fiery swords, chariots, horses, all the ones that don't really look like, you know, the normal sort of angelic human type form. fiery whirlwinds, ladders, all those things. He's the chief of that. But when I've engaged him, he does appear quite human. Didn't have any wings when I engaged him. Was quite very I'm really sort of good looking, sort of fit, healthy sort of guy, but was obviously not a man. And he's the key keeper and the timekeeper of the heavens. So he has keys that open and close seasons. He has keys that open things, times, those type of things. So I've met him a number of times on a golden mountain in the garden of God, in the Father's garden, in which he has given me keys. He gave me a key to unlock heaven, to do activations with people so that they could engage. Big golden key. I met him a few weeks ago. We had a regional gathering where I met him, and he had 3 key rings, and they were formed as a wheel within a wheel within a wheel. And they were keys for our area, region, and nation when I engaged him in that. And they all had to work together. I engaged him again, actually, recently, in terms of a key, which was a fiery key to open a season of fire for us as a church. Yippee, everyone said when I said it. So I was like, oh, well, yeah, sorry, I had a mandate. Take it up with God if you have a problem. So it was like, but I've actually connected him a few times recently. There's often the association with Metatron's cube, which is obviously the sort of geometric shapes, which are to do with the different spheres of government, dimensional government, governmental spheres, which are patterned, that you can find the tree of life geometric shape in there, and lots of different geometric shapes, which again I've been in within the cube itself, was like the multifaceted wisdom of grace of God as facets that you could look into and see the colors and the sort of that depths to some of the things of God. When I've been in there, that I think will have a lot more understanding released to it. I think as we understand more about how we align things, I think the aligning of the circle of the deep is to do with engaging that as well, because of the different geometric patterns that it forms when you get things coming together in 3s and 4s and 5s and 6s and 7s and all the different numbers that God is the ultimate mathematician and brings order into things governmentally. And people have obviously taken some of that and twisted it, and you have the tree of life, and then you have New Age people using it as chakras and entrance points within the body to that type of thing, patterned after the same pattern, and in a sense has a fact of the river of life and the tree of life and what that will bring into us physically with fruitfulness and stuff. But a lot of it you just have to make sure you take it to God and see what the truth is, and forget the rubbish which other people have taken with it. So that for me, my engagement with Metatron personally has not been to do with the cube. I think people have called it Metatron's cube. I have no personal engagement with Metatron over the cube. It's just the shape. We engaged the shape here a couple of years ago in an encounter with our bench of 12, where I think 6 or 7 of us engaged this shape from different perspectives, and we were just like, whoa, what's all that? Because we had no idea. We had no idea what it was, but we figured out if 6 or 7 of us had the same encounter, which was to do with these geometric patterns that we were all seeing from different perspectives, then God was doing something to get us to find out what it was. So then when we started searching for the patterns that we saw, we came up with this, Metatron's cube, with no idea what it was. But I personally haven't ever connected with Metatron over that. It's purely when I've engaged him, it's been about being the key keeper and the timekeeper. That's how I've engaged. But so yeah, that's as much as I really know about him. But I have engaged with him twice in the last couple of weeks. So interestingly.
Yeah, it's interesting that he, like you said, he looks human, but he's not. And I'm like,
well, no, yeah,
and
no.
there are others similar, like a similar class, and I'm trying to understand, who they are or what they are.
Well, yeah, I mean, there are lots of angelic order that appear human-like. I mean, such that it says to be aware about being hospitable in case you entertain angels unaware. So they can manifest in human form, even physically on the earth. Now there are some that say that there's a limit to the time that they can stay in that form without being stuck. But I don't know whether I know that's a sort of a Hebrew sort of traditional understanding. And obviously there are those that left their first estate as the watcher angels who came and sort of messed things up, before the flood, who seemingly, were locked up, and I've seen them. But there are orders. I mean, the Elohim, the Ben Elohim, they tend to be more humanoid in their appearance, and even those that do have wings, often, look human with that perspective. I mean, it's only the weird ones, like the cherubim and the seraphim, and some of those that have the four faces, and those faces are spinning around, and they're quite, things. There are some angels, obviously orders, that are huge. I mean, absolutely huge in terms of some of the Ishim. They seem to be very, very powerful, and but when I've engaged with some of the regional angels, they've not had wings. They've been quite large, but definitely looked sort of a human in form, even though they were 75 miles high. One of them, because he could have these feet on across our region, one which is about 75 miles wide. So, and then it was stood over the region. So I was like, whoa. But then when I was engaging it as if I was talking to somebody, even though when I saw it, it was like, whoa, you're huge. As soon as I started to engage, it was like I was talking to someone face to face. And I think that happens when you engage in spiritual things. There are sort of dimensional realities that are not normal, or we call them normal, not, how can you talk to someone that's 75 miles high or whatever face to face? But you can, because it's a spiritual thing. It's like I'm engaging him in the spirit with my spirit. So my spirit can be that big because I have the capacity to enlarge it to whatever I need to expand it to cover our whole region. So my spirit covers our whole region and overshadows it when I press it out. So my spirit has the capacity to be huge. Because we're not really talking about physical locations as much as spiritual authority. So it's like, I'm extending it over my region, but I'm extending it governmentally, not physically, because it's not a physical thing. It's a spiritual thing. So there are many different orders, the kashmelim, or the ribbons of color, and sort of those that stream around us during worship times and things. The seraphim, the burning ones, who are full of fire, and then you also have the others that have different form and function at different times. Generally, there isn't that great description of what they're like in the Bible, because the purpose was they were sent with a message. The focus was never on the messenger as much as the message. That was the point. It doesn't describe Gabriel when he came to Daniel or to Mary with a message, because the whole point was, I've come to bring you this message, because they never want to draw attention to themselves. They're there representing God, and the purpose is that they would obviously bring glory to God in what they're doing, not themselves. Obviously that was Satan's downfall, that he wanted to bring the glory to himself and have that place. So yeah, I think the best way of engaging the canopy of angels is when you go onto your throne on your mountain, the canopy comes around you as it does come around God's throne. you can go up into the different layers, if you like, or dimensions, and engage them and go and talk to them and go and find out what they do, and go and, because it's like a place. I mean, all of those places are things you place, sort of dimensional things you can go into, and you find a lot of interesting things about them and what they do and the things that are in those dimensions that they occupy. Because if we're going to use them, and they're going to be involved in the ordinances of heaven, as sort of those that are legions that we have accessible, then we do need to know which ones to call on for specific things. And sometimes they will be assigned when you take a mandate or scroll or something into the court of angels. They'll come and volunteer and come forth. And sometimes we need to call those ones we need to engage. If we're having a key to open a season of fire, I will certainly be calling for the seraphim to start engaging. And one of the 4 angels that's here of transformation, the refiner's fire, is a seraphim angel. That's one of, but all the 4 angels are different, and that we have that engage with us. They're not the same order. They're very different in their appearance and very different in what they do, but they function together. So there are orders of angels that, like those 4 are orders of angels. So people they have many different angels in an order, and there are many different orders within the canopies, and the orders are function rather than person. So it's not their personal name. They all have a personal name assigned to them by God, but they are part of orders that describe their function rather than their person. And you can go and find out if you want to. I suppose I've never really bothered to go and find out their personal names, because I just want to engage in their function particularly. That's when I engage them as transformation or winds of change or whatever. Well, the winds of change angel, is, how do I describe that? I mean, it's like, sometimes it's hard to even pin down what it looks like, because winds of change blow, and they blow where they will, and there's even a sense where it's sometimes they can change form and shape depending on what they're assigned to do. It's not very helpful, because in a sense, but then I think the point is, well, you're not supposed to be looking to describe them, or in that sense. The whole function is they have a purpose that we are to engage in as ministering spirits on behalf of us, who are God heirs of salvation, or messengers from God, or on assignment from God for specific purposes. We engage with them. I mean, you do get them coming through the atmosphere sometimes in the form of power orbs, which is why you get those sort of power orb things with faces and things in them appear in certain situations. And it seems that they come through the atmosphere, and they need to come in that form, otherwise they get held up. Now, I don't know why they come through the atmosphere as opposed to coming through portals, but generally we have to open up portals for them to come through. Whereas if God is sending them, they seem to come in many different sorts of ways. I don't know. I'm not an expert in it. I just sort of have engaged with them quite a lot. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, as I engage with more and different ones, just get curious. I mean, for instance, just one more question about the angelic. Would you call the fiery birds, the ones that look like the phoenix? I know all of them did not fall. The fiery birds, would you call those seraphims as well? I mean, they're just...
I would call them part of the order of the chaos, because they're not... they're the living creatures, and they're described as living creatures, not of human form. So I would describe them of that order. But I don't know. I mean, they could be of any, but that's I found that the living creatures are sometimes like creatures and sometimes like almost like inanimate objects, but are living. You know, like the fiery whirlwind. You know, it's like the pillar of cloud and the pillar of fire, which the children of Israel followed, were angels. So that's how they appeared. The same, Elijah went up into heaven in a whirlwind, which was an angelic being. There was also the fiery chariots. Then you had the fiery horses and chariots surrounding Elisha, and when his servant's eyes was open, those I associate with the chaos, fiery sword, you know, guarding to the tree of life, and I've seen golden ladders. I've seen all sorts of stuff. Really, some of it's really weird, you know. But then that's it, because it's not what we associate, because we tend to think, well, angels have nice wings, and you know, and they're nice little cherubs. They're just obviously just picture postcard views of the angelic realm. Some of them are really, really stern. I mean, some of the which ones do I engage with a lot? We had the gathering angels that would stand around our gatherings waiting for people to respond that they would remove stumbling blocks from them, and they never looked happy. I mean, they just were like, whoa. They looked like they were on a mission, and they were really stern looking things. You know, you have the hunter gathering angels that have wings like razor blades. I mean, they're just weird looking things, you know, very much almost sort of metallic in things rather than feathers. You know, definitely different sorts of things. You know, I have my personal angel. One of them is a white winged horse. You know, the other one is a warrior looking thing with armor. I mean, just, you know, 7 foot tall and more, and just fierce warrior angel. I didn't get a choice about it. Those were the ones who were assigned. So I just met them. So, you know.
Can I go back to the men in white linen for a minute?
Yeah, sure.
I don't solicit, you know, them, which I'm glad to know that we can go into the court of the upright and do that. And I think in our meetings we've done that a few times. We've gone in, but in the mornings I just enter in, just acknowledging and in thanksgiving and praise with the Lord, and just to set my private time of connection with Him. And in that place is where, like I was saying before, there's just a lot of activity with the men in white linen, and they just come and they bring things, and you helped me with that, to not complicate it, because before that I was really trying to dig things out and trying to understand things, and instead I just take it to the Lord and have Him tell me what to do with that. But there's a lot of times I don't get any direction with what to do with it, and so I've just been journaling it, and with the hopes and intention of going back to it. But there's so much activity, I mean, almost daily, of things that are being brought, and I just I don't want to err on the side of missing something. So what are your thoughts there?
Okay. Well, what I think happens a lot is they're like the 7 spirits of God and different things that are assigned around our lives. They're active when we don't necessarily even know it.
Right.
And I do believe that what happens is our spirit receives something of the revelation of what happens when something is brought that we don't need to necessarily cognitively understand to engage, and it will get released from our spirit because we cherish it and honor it and value it, and then our spirit will receive it and release it, whatever it is. And sometimes it's like, you know, I don't ask anywhere near as number of questions I used to ask, because I realize I don't need to understand. I just need to flow. So if something comes, it's like I was given by Prudence 7 navigational instruments, a sextant and a compass and logbooks and various things, which are representing almost like seamanship, when you're on a, I know, sort of a galleon or something that would be operating with these different instruments. And before I would have researched, what are these for? How do these work? And what do I need to understand? I just received them by faith and accepted them. And what I found was I'm able to navigate around the things of heaven much easier. I don't take out a sextant and it's like, oh, where do I need to go? My spirit has the ability to know where I am and to navigate where I need to be. So it's that type of thing that I find my spirit is able to receive those things, and I don't always need to try and figure it out and work it out, which gives you much more. Well, you don't have to waste a lot of time doing stuff that you don't need to do. And I used to waste time trying to understand and figure it out when I didn't need to. Now, God will tell you if you need to know. And I think, but what you'll find is your spirit will have received something that then it will function in and do something as a result of that encounter and whatever that was that was brought. It will become just an outworking of the flow of you being in the realm of heaven from those things. Because I think it's so important that we don't try and operate from a heavenly perspective through the soul. Our soul can engage in it if we're actively, engaging our imagination or whatever, but it's not necessary to reason everything out, but to more flow instinctively, as directed, led by the Spirit, our spirit, in that way, and I found that makes it much easier. And if you journal it, I journal everything, so you can always go back to it as your spirit leads. And sometimes my spirit takes me back to something and I start to re-engage it because there's something more, that is the time when that needs to be engaged. And so I'll engage it from that perspective. But very often, I've journaled things, over the last 5-6 years that I've not gone back to. And I don't feel any need to, so I don't. If I ever did, then I would flow back to it and engage it again. But I know my spirit has, in encounters, received revelation that my mind has not yet had a need to understand or connect to, so I don't. So long as I come into agreement and my mind flows from what's flowing from heaven, then that's the major point. I'm releasing that as a flow through my life, and I don't have to understand something to release it or operate in with it, because whatever it is, it's my spirit can function with that without the mind necessarily. Now, if I'm going to teach it to somebody else, let's say it's something which is an experience that I've had, and then God wants me to unveil that to others because, hey, there's something I want you to release, then he will give me an understanding that I then can share with others. But that's not often in those things, and sometimes it's a time period. So I didn't talk about engaging the circle of the deep and all that sort of 12 chancellors' houses until I was shown the revelation of how it worked, because I couldn't describe it, and I couldn't, I just couldn't, but then I knew it was time that God wanted me to talk about it. So I said, well, if you want me to talk about it, then you're going to have to give me a way of expressing this that people will understand, otherwise they'll be as in the dark as I was, when I first started to engage it. And it's just sort of like, whoa, if I'm going to describe what I saw, that's what I saw, and that's what I needed to see. Other people may see something else, but the basic function of aligning what was with what is, so that what will be can be released and opened. That was the purpose of seeing how these things align. My individual experiences within them are mine, and that's how I engage with it, to have an understanding, or at least an interaction with it that made some sense, to me. But I still couldn't describe to you a lot of what I saw in those houses, because the description of it, A, I suppose, is personal, but B, it's like, I don't think it would give you much insight just for me to tell you what I saw, because I'm just describing some symbolic things, perhaps, in that way. So, yeah.
Yeah, that helps a lot. Thank you, because I just don't want to miss something, but I do honor everything that they give me, and for whatever revelation God does release. I think too, it's a testimony of having to just give up my right to understand, so that, and I love that about just letting, it's something for your spirit to flow in, and doesn't necessarily involve your mind at all. So yeah, that helps me a lot. Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay. Anything else? Got some time for some more things.
I can share a little more that's been really interesting lately. Just this whole, how you are taught, Holy Spirit within, and then Holy Spirit comes on. It seems that there's been this shift to Jesus within, and then Jesus come on. I mean, in 2008, he promised me this hand over hand guidance. And now he keeps showing me his hand, like a glove, his hand over my hand, or his hand holding my hand, moving it. And it's really, it's interesting, because I'm used to Holy Spirit doing that. But now the Lord, it's,
Yeah.
I know our God is one, the 3-in-1 God. But it's just interesting that aspect.
Yeah, my personal relationship with God, through the Spirit, Jesus the Father, they're very different. They have very different, almost frequencies, fragrances, or characteristics. I know who I'm talking to, and I'm very aware of the differences between them. I think there's a lot of people that would teach that Jesus and the Father are only in us through the Spirit. But I don't believe that's what the word says. John 14 very clearly says that we will come and make our abode with you. And he was talking about him and the Father. He wasn't talking about the Spirit. And I personally have engaged, when I open my first love gate every day, I engage with all three. And I yield and surrender, and I engage in living water, and I engage with Jesus and take his yoke on me, and I yield the throne of my life to the Father to be sat on the seat of rest in government. I engage with them every day, individually and differently, and I'm aware of them in that way. I know some people will teach. Ian Clayton teaches stuff about, well, two of them have to be in heaven to be agreement. It's like, I just don't understand the concept of that, because they're omnipresent. They're everywhere. They can engage everywhere. It's like Jesus isn't restricted to engaging with me and not we're able to engage you at the same time. Of course he can. Otherwise he wouldn't get much done, would he? If he, he needs to engage, hundreds of millions of people at the same time, he's not limited by our understanding of time and space. in that way. So he is, if he's omnipresent, then Jesus is omnipresent, the Spirit's omnipresent, the Father's omnipresent, and they can engage omnipresently with everybody in different ways. So there's no reason to see, well, you know, if they're in heaven, they're on the earth. You know, where two or three are gathered, there they are in the midst. You know, Jesus promised that. So I don't relate to the fact that, well, two of them have to appear in heaven or stay in heaven. And, you know, it's like, well, the Father and Jesus are in heaven and the Holy Spirit's on earth, and therefore that's how it works, because they're omnipresent. They're on the throne. I mean, while they're on the throne, they're also engaged in the garden, and they're also engaged in, I don't know, otherwise, how could we possibly have all these encounters if it was limited to one person at one time, one place? So it's much broader than that. And I understand the principle of agreement, and I understand that being a symbolic thing, yeah, of agreement. But in reality, I believe that they are within me, because that's what Jesus said that they would be. They would come and dwell, make their home or abode in me. And as I'm a house of God, then I have the capacity to house them. And if I open my first love gate, then they come and occupy more space. You know, so that's been my experience of engaging that. And I do believe God wants us to very much engage in their person in different ways. And so, yeah, Jesus engaging in that way, why not? You know, sometimes in the garden of my heart, I sit and talk to Jesus. Sometimes I sit and talk to the Father. You know, so I think it's all about going deeper in intimacy with all aspects of that, like being baptized in the Holy Spirit. Well, we can be baptized into Jesus and baptized in the Father, because, you know, it says when we're baptized in the name of the Father, Son, and Spirit. So I can be in the name of, in them, and therefore in the power of being in that relationship with them, and therefore clothed with, you know, righteous peace and joy and the way, truth, and the life, and the armor of God and the armor of righteousness and the armor of light. You know, it's all aspects of being in them individually, you know, which takes place in various connections. You know, I have it taking place within me. I've engaged in rivers and pools where I've gone and been baptized into a deeper revelation of experience of the Father and Jesus and different things. It's, you know, not, I don't think we should limit anything like that. And so definitely Jesus can engage with you and it be like his hand. And one day the Father can engage with you and it can be like his hand. Why not? You know, I don't see a problem with that. And it's great because you begin to engage them differently and understand more and more of character and nature of who they are. You know, yes, it is God, but God's expressed himself in that way to reveal himself in multitudes. You know, he is manifold grace and wisdom. So it's a multi-dimensional, multicolored, multi-everything. You know, how can he be contained to, you know, a one thing? And that's what religion tries to do. Put him in a box that fits a nice, neat, and tidy shape that will bring him in a way to people's understanding, but in reality that just limits him. There's a huge limitation that religion puts on because of those type of things. Oh, you can engage with Jesus because you're only, he sent the Spirit. Well, that's not been my experience anyway.
While you were talking about that, I was experiencing my mind trying to contain all that you're talking about the whole time we've been together. And it seems like the Lord's saying to me, why are you trying to contain me in your mind? It's your whole being, your spirit man that needs to flow, not the mind. am I wrong, or I'm perceiving that, and I'm going, how did I do that, God?
Well, yeah, I mean, we should be one. I mean, it's oneness, really, that it shouldn't really matter that we try and define what it is. It's just, this is who we are. And therefore, no, I don't try and limit it. I know God is working on renewing my mind so that my mind and consciousness has a greater capacity to outwork the mind of Christ. I know that within the functions of my brain, that's where everything is interpreted, because that's what the brain does, interprets all the information that is gathered from the nervous system and the vibrational frequencies that come through the spirit, through the soul, and everything else. And it all, but it's one. I think it's just, if we see ourselves functioning in oneness, then we don't try and separate it out into parts. It's only when you're trying to deal with understanding the different parts that it's helpful to see them as separate, because you are sort of, okay, here's the spirit, and here's the soul, and the senses of the soul, and the gateways, and all that stuff. But in reality, God's desire is always oneness and wholeness or peace. And I think you're right. It's like, you know, I don't think about it as, well, my mind is doing this or whatever. It's just me. You know, and I may be in two different places, as my spirit is in the realm of heaven and my soul is connected, and they function together instantly. But I still see myself as one, because I'm not looking at it from a separation type perspective. You know, I don't see it that way as, well, you know, my body is here and my spirit's there. It's just me, wherever I am. Connected. So yeah, the mind is needs a lot of renewing, because of the constructs that we have and have contained within our mind that don't function according to a heavenly perspective. It needs to be renewed to align with a heavenly perspective, a spiritual dimension to it, rather than, you know, using reason to figure it all out and understand it. So yeah, you know, and what I'm looking at is working on conscious, subconscious, and unconscious aspects of my mind to get them to function together, so that I have more things programmed into the unconscious area of my brain that operate automatically, that I don't need to be consciously thinking about. I mean, we would really struggle if we had to consciously think about breathing, making sure my heart was pumping, making sure the kidneys functioned correctly, and everything else. We would spend all our time just focusing on staying alive. Well, that stuff is programmed within the unconscious, and I want more programmed in the unconscious, so I can do more of those things and more other things instinctively without having to think about them. It just happens. Because it's programmed there, rather than in my conscious mind. You know, I see it as, I mean, the way God helped me to see it was in, like a computer. The computer has three sorts of memory. It has hard drive memory, which is a storage for things, and then it has random access memory, which is where programs get loaded to function, and it also has read-only memory, which is ROM memory, and that is where the BIOS is stored, and the things which are the sort of basic underlying things that are the, you know, input output connections, and how handshaking takes place between the hardware and the software and all that sort of stuff. And so I look at my mind in the same thing. So I can have things programmed into read-only memory, because you can reprogram ROM if you've got a special, you know, little thing that enables you to flash your ROM to update it and things like that. Your BIOS, you can flash it in a different way than you can just copy information to a hard drive. And then when you click on an icon, that gets programmed into the random access memory to run. You know, and the more random access memory you got, the more you can run at the same time. So, my laptop's got, 16 gigabytes of RAM, so I can open loads of programs and leave them all open. When my first computer had 640K of RAM and a 10 megabyte hard drive, and I thought that was huge, now, everyone's phone's probably got, gigabytes, 30 gigabytes of memory and stuff, but I want to increase the capacity that my mind has to function how it was supposed to function eternally, and outwork that. And I'm working on that. I'm renewing it. I'm, using communion to renew it, and, engaging God within, so that I'm not limited within the capacities that my mind would have. But I'm not going to become a mind person. I'm just going to become a person who flows from the Spirit that outworks through that in a more integrated wholeness way, I think. So, yeah. Anyway, okay. All right, I need to leave it there.